In the mid-1980s in British Columbia, Millie King had her first encounter with a strange woman that, as a child, she named the out-of-place lady. Back then, she struggled to comprehend the malicious nature of this stranger. Over the course of the next 30-plus years, Millie experienced 4 meetings with this malicious woman, and with age came the horrifying realization that each prediction the out-of-place lady made unraveled into a sick truth. Millie lived in constant fear, not knowing when the out-of-place lady would reappear next, but knowing that it would result in the most harrowing losses of her life. The first encounter. My story began back in the mid-80s when my family moved from Vancouver to a small town, and I'm not saying the name of it, as I don't want to risk anyone finding her and going through what I went through. At first, I found the smallness of it all strange. Back in the city, no one knew my name, but here, it seemed to slip off their tongues with ease. The mailman, the neighbors, the woman from the convenience store, they all knew who I was. This is something that soon became my normal. However, there was one person that I never grew accustomed to seeing or speaking my name. In my childhood innocence, I named her the out-of-place lady. My first meeting with her happened when I was 7 years old and in the tall grass with my older brother Callum. He was annoyed that I was walking too slow, so he ran off ahead, and I wandered through the tall grass, cuts brandishing my knees and sobbing in fear as I desperately called out Callum's name, and I heard rustling within the tall grass and I thought it was him. And through my sobs, I managed to smile, one that instantly faded when I saw that it wasn't my brother at all, but a strange lady. As she slowly walked toward me, I noticed how different she looked from the rest of the people in town. Through my young eyes, she looked like someone from beyond my darkest nightmares. She had dark hair, dark as licorice, that spiraled down in thick tangles. And she wore a dark dress, not quite black, but not gray either. There were stitch marks on the sleeves and along the hem of the fabric that reached her ankles, and I saw this dry, encrusted blood. And how the sleeves and hem seemed stuck in place, and I realized, to my horror, they were sewn to her body. She shuffled toward me, the tall grass not seeming to bother her. I remained there, frozen in place, too afraid to flinch. As she came closer to me, I heard my young heart thud with more ferocity than I thought possible. And then she stopped right in front of me. She looked at me with enlarged violet eyes, and in a voice as quiet as if she was telling me a secret spoke, "Millie, your brother will find you unharmed, but a stranger will find him broken." I looked at her with pure fear, and then I heard the shouts of my name, and just like that, she started walking backwards until she was lost to the tall grass. Callum ran toward me, and through uncontrollable sobs, I tried to tell him what had happened, but he didn't believe me. No one believes the words of a child, and I remained inconsolable for days, convinced the out-of-place lady would appear under my bed or in my closet, a needle and thread in her hand to stitch my clothes to my skin, just like hers. Through the trauma of it all, I refused to leave the house, and my mom had to take off work to care for me. Normally, she picked up Callum after school, but I wouldn't go in the car, so she told him to walk. Time ticked by, but Callum didn't return from school. Hikers found his backpack and one red sneaker in the trees by the point the green turned to rocks. Mom had always told us not to venture there. It never made any sense why he would go there alone. A member of the search team found my brother's mangled, broken body, crushed at the bottom of the rocks. The police told us he must have tripped and fallen to his death. My parents blamed themselves for this. For years, the out-of-place lady's words weaved their way through my thoughts, and I found myself riddled with guilt. The second encounter. By the age of 16, I hated school as much as I hated my small town. I heard the whispers that I was, and always would be, the sister of the boy who fell to his death. For years, I had grown used to people looking at me as if they would an injured puppy, and never knowing, were their words of kindness? Were they true? Or from a place of pity? As a result, I found it hard to open up to people, and I only had one friend, Seth, but I trusted him. I thought he would always be there. How wrong I was. It was a gray day, and I was waiting around the back of school for Seth at our usual meeting spot, the bleachers. One minute I was sitting there alone, and the next, I looked up and I saw through the spitting clouds. I wasn't alone. There, sitting at the end of the row, was a woman. My heart thudded as I had this strange feeling of instant recognition. I knew her. I'd seen her tangled dark hair and strange presence before. As I saw the encrusted blood on the skin around her dress sleeves, I gulped back in dread. Her dress was sewn onto her skin. I knew what I'd always known. She was more than make-believe from a child's imagination. She was real. The out-of-place lady was real. I looked away from her, hoping that when I looked back she was just a teacher or a student. Only when I dared to look back, I saw that she was now just a seat away from me. Her violet eyes looking straight at me as she messed with one of the stitches that attached sleeve to flesh. I wanted to say something to her, but I couldn't find the words. I wanted to believe I was imagining her, that I'd conjured her up from my pent-up grief. In an almost whisper, she spoke, "Millie, your friend will hurt your heart, but his heart will stop before it festers." I reached out for her with a shaky arm, forcing myself to see if she was real or not. As my fingers were about to touch her, I heard footsteps behind me. Seth was walking up the steps toward me, and just like that, the out-of-place lady had gone. I didn't want Seth to think I was mad, so even though he could see I was upset, I didn't tell him why. My childhood involved telling many psychologists about the out-of-place lady, and being told she wasn't real, and that my grieving mind had just made her up. I couldn't go through that again, so I sat there, quietly, resting my trembling head on Seth's shoulder as he comforted me without asking questions. A week passed by, and I hoped to believe that I imagined seeing her, that her words were just a fragment of my grieving mind. And as soon as I let my guard down, my world changed forever. I'd always liked Seth, but I never expected him to ask me to the school dance. I just thought it was something we'd do without saying so. We always went together. Maybe I was foolish for thinking that he liked me the same way I liked him, but at the time, I dared to believe that it was true. I'll never forget how my heart felt when I walked out to the bleachers the day before the school dance, and I saw Seth in our spot, kissing that loud girl from class. My naive heart felt like it cracked that day, but it was nothing compared to the horror yet to come. I didn't go to the dance. I couldn't watch him with her. He didn't seem to understand why I was stonewalling him. He had knocked on my door that afternoon, but I hadn't answered. I vowed never to answer him again. A wish that, to my terror, became a horrific truth. It was the next day when I heard the news. Seth was dead. His heart had stopped working. Some students had found him collapsed on the school field, blood that wasn't his covering his entire body, and his face twisted in pure fear. Her words had come true, and there was nothing I could do about it. Still, the guilt twisted away at me. I didn't understand what was happening, but through the eyes of the world, I was still a kid. No one would believe me. The third encounter. The years passed by, and I seemed to live them in a blur. By the age of 25, I was back living in the city and working in a diner. I just wanted to blend in and be a nobody. I wanted to live my life without anyone knowing my name or the deaths that tarred me. Not growing close to people was my golden rule, a rule I broke. When I met her, Chelsea wasn't like anyone else I'd ever met before. I never liked girls before, but I liked her. Everything about her felt contagious, but in the best way possible. Being around her made the days seem brighter and gave my life meaning. I shouldn't have ever let her in. I knew that then as much as I know it now, but I was selfish in my longing for her. I was working the night shift. There was only one customer in there drinking cold coffee. I heard his slurps from all the way in the kitchen, and then suddenly, they were replaced by silence. I knew before I returned to the counter something was wrong. I felt it in my gut, but still, nothing prepared me for what I was about to see. Sitting in the far booth, by the window, was a woman with dark tangled hair and a dress stitched to her skin. I had to do a double take to make sure she was real. I tried to swallow back my fear, but it wouldn't go away. As much as she wouldn't. The out-of-place lady. All these years later, she was back. Her words brought about death. I couldn't let her take someone else I loved from me. Before she even locked her eyes on me, I turned and I started to run toward the door. I left the diner and ran through the lit-up streets. I ran until I couldn't run any further, but I was foolish for doing this. I should have known I could never outrun her. As I leaned against an alleyway and caught my breath, she stepped out of the shadows. I couldn't outrun her, just as much as I couldn't outrun her words and what she knew. I heard it, even though I didn't want to. Even though I gripped my hands over my ears and begged her to stop. Her words found me, a deafening whisper. Millie, you can't escape the truth, just as your love can't escape me. I let out a silent scream and I watched her back away from me. I heard a ringing in my pocket. When I pulled out my phone, it was Chelsea calling me. I didn't want to answer, but I couldn't not. In my panic, I told her I couldn't explain how or why, but she was in danger and she needed to leave. She needed to go somewhere no one would expect her to go. She laughed. Laughter that turned to a scream. A scream that didn't seem to stop until finally it met silence. And then it felt like there had never been sound through the painful quiet. I ran to Chelsea's apartment, but I knew it was too late. By the time I let myself in, I felt the coldness. I felt its mark. I found her lying across the kitchen table, a lifeless body. Her pajamas freshly stitched in place to her flesh with threads stained red, blood dripping down her skin like a twisted piece of art. I held her in my arms and I cried into her hair. I had her blood on my hands, but it was too late. I couldn't save her. I couldn't beat the out-of-place lady. I would never beat her. How could I? No one but me believed she existed. The fourth encounter. I spent the following years locked away in both mind and body. They stuck me in a hospital for my own good, and they didn't listen to me. They told me this was my mind's way of dealing with Chelsea's murder. They never found who did it. I told them it was the out-of-place lady, but no one believed me. It was always her. I know that now, but no one listened to my words. She was an omen of death, but she latched onto me for some reason. I just didn't know why. When they let me out of the hospital, I went back there, to my old town, to the tall grass, where I'd first seen the out-of-place lady. I spent hours there, trying to scavenge through my memories and place the exact point where I'd seen her all those years ago. It was when the sky started to gray that I knew she wasn't coming. And that's when I saw the man walk out of the tall grass, a hunting rifle slung over his shoulder. He was kind to me, and he didn't judge. He asked me what I was doing out there all alone, and I told him something had found me here many years ago, and now I was trying to find it. He tilted his head and with a sigh replied, "Some things don't always want to be found. Come on, let's leave before the sky turns black." I followed him away from the tall grass, knowing that I would never go back there again. I couldn't stop the out-of-place lady. One day she would appear again. All I could do was seclude myself from the world and make sure there was no one else I loved left to lose. I moved away and I lived in the shadows, having as little interaction with people as I could. The years passed by, but I knew one day she would return. I was 42 when it happened. I felt her presence before I saw her. She was sitting in the darkness of my cabin as if she belonged there. I pulled out a chair and I sat at the table. I didn't acknowledge her, even though I saw her tangled hair and her sewn-in-place dress. I felt her darkness surround me, but thought it didn't matter. There was no one left I cared about. She made sure of that. I looked into the darkness and I saw her violet eyes stop on me. They seemed to glow, as in an echoing whisper she spoke, "Millie, you are a lost soul, but soon your soul will belong to me." I felt the depths of her emptiness, and I knew whatever she was not from this world. For all these years, she fed off my misery and made me live this half-life, one fueled by confusion, disbelief, grief, and fear. She disappeared as quickly as she arrived, but I screamed out, "Why? Why me? What do you want from me?" And she didn't answer. She didn't have to. It didn't matter. I couldn't stop her. I never could stop her. Now I wait, knowing that she will come for me. Could be days, weeks, or months, but it will happen. She will take me. I can't escape her, but I can tell my story. I don't know who she is or why she latched onto me, but she did. And now I fear when she is done with me, she will start again, and she will latch onto someone else. Millie King's account of the out-of-place lady was found in her cabin in Colorado by a local police officer. All of her belongings were left in the cabin, including her passport and bank cards, but Millie was never seen or heard from again. The exact details surrounding her disappearance remain a mystery, but her final words are a testimony to these unfathomable occurrences that happen without a definite motive or reason. There are unexplainable evils out there, ones that come and go at will and weave their web of destruction as they please. The out-of-place lady is one such evil, one who at any moment may reappear and latch on to an unsuspecting soul. For more scary horror stories, please subscribe.